Frank Matthews was destined for a life of crime at an early age. By the time he was 14, he had dropped out of school and was leading a gang of teenagers that stole chickens from local farms. He then moved to Philadelphia, where he was involved in the illegal gambling rackets, making important connections that would serve him later in life. By 1965, Frank was in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, working as a barber, loan shark, and enforcer for the Black Mafia. He attempted to partner with the Gambino and Bonanno crime families, but they declined, so he met with Cuban Mafia members, with whom he bought his first kilo of cocaine. By the early 70s, Frank was running a multi-million-dollar operation, supplying many major dealers throughout the East Coast. In 1973, Frank was arrested by federal agents on tax evasion and drug trafficking charges. After bailing out and realizing that he was facing 50 years in prison, he took $20 million and fled the country with his girlfriend, never to be seen again. Welcome to History's Biggest Villains. Frank Matthews was born on February 13, 1944 in Durham, North Carolina. He was raised by his aunt Marcella Steele after his mother died when he was 4. He was a decent student at the East End Elementary School before he dropped out in the 7th grade. At the age of 14, Frank led a gang of teenagers who stole chickens from local farms. On one occasion, he was confronted by a farmer, and Frank hit him in the face with a brick. He was arrested for theft and assault and sentenced to a year at the Raleigh State Reformatory for Boys. After his release, he moved to Philadelphia, where he was involved in a numbers racket. Because of this racket, he became closely connected with members of the Black Mafia, such as Major Coxon and Bumpy Johnson. Frank was arrested in 1963 on drug charges, but agreed to leave Philadelphia in order to avoid jail time. He then moved to the Bed-Stuy neighborhood in Brooklyn, where he continued his numbers racket. Once Frank got to Brooklyn, he realized that running numbers wasn't as lucrative as a drug game, so he decided to get back in. But by the mid-1960s, the Italian Mafia were the leading distributors of wholesale drugs. Frank attempted to work for the Gambino and Bonanno crime families, but he was rejected for reasons unknown. So instead, he went to meet with Spanish Raymond Marquez, the king of the illegal numbers racket in Harlem at the time. Raymond was able to connect Frank with Cuban Mafia boss Rolando Gonzalez Nunez. After Nunez fled to Venezuela to avoid an indictment, he sold Frank his first kilo of cocaine for $20,000, promising to supply him with more in the future. Frank and Rolando's business relationship blossomed, and Frank was regularly receiving large loads of cocaine and heroin from South America. And within a year, he became one of the major players in the New York drug trade. Frank continued to search for new suppliers, doing business with anyone that had pure product. And let's just say Frank definitely got high off his own supply. By the early 1970s, Frank's drug operation was handling multi-million-dollar shipments of heroin, with Frank earning an estimated $10 million in 1972. According to the DEA, Frank controlled the cutting, packaging, and sale of heroin in every major East Coast city. His empire had stretched to 21 states, as far south as Alabama and as far west as Missouri. Due to his distrust of the Italians, he only insisted on working with blacks and some Hispanics. At the time, he was making as much as $250,000 in cash per deal. Frank operated 2 drug houses in Brooklyn, nicknamed the Ponderosa and the OK Corral. Both of these homes were heavily fortified, with walls reinforced with steel and concrete, along with guards armed with automatic weapons. As Frank's organization controlled the sale of heroin, it also supplied major dealers in the East Coast, selling shipments for up to $26,000 a kilo. Frank later purchased a home on 7 Buttonwood Road, 3 blocks from Gambino family boss Paul Castellano, as he would take many trips to Las Vegas with suitcases full of cash to launder his drug money at the casinos for a fee of 15 to 18%. Frank also organized a meeting between all the major black and Hispanic drug traffickers in the U.S., and this took place in Atlanta, Georgia. The topic of discussion was how to bring in heroin without the involvement of the Italian Mafia. The bosses that were present decided to work more independently with the Corsican and Cuban Mafias, agreeing to diversify to cocaine, a product that was readily available in massive quantities. The DEA was aware of the meeting and closely monitored who attended. This meeting was important because it represented a changing of the guard in the drug business. Previously, the American Mafia controlled the importing and sale of narcotics, also being able to control who could or who couldn't advance past them. The Mafia made the connections while the blacks sold and used the drugs in their cities. Now, The black dealers are making connections, taking control of their own neighborhoods. This would later evolve into local black gangs, pushing out the out-of-town black suppliers trying to indirectly take over their neighborhoods. Frank's presence as a top drug trafficker made him a lot of enemies as well. One of the most violent incidents took place on Easter Sunday, 1972 in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Tyrone Palmer, or Mr. Millionaire, was Frank's main Philadelphia dealer, and he was at Club Harlem surrounded by his bodyguards. However, members of the Black Mafia were in the club as well. In plain view of almost 800 people, Black Mafia leader Sam Christian shot Palmer in the face, killing him. Before Palmer's bodyguards could react, a gunfight ensued, with 5 people killed and 26 people wounded, many of them innocent bystanders. Amazingly, no one was prosecuted for the shooting, and none of the potential 799 witnesses came forward. Later in 1972, Frank held another meeting at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas during the Muhammad Ali and Jerry Quarry rematch. Ali's first fight since being suspended for refusing to serve in Vietnam. Unbeknownst to Frank at the time, the DEA had a warrant to tap his phone. Authorities learned that he was preparing to move into a large house in a wealthy neighborhood on Staten Island with his wife and 3 kids. They also learned that he was paying flight attendants $1,000 a month to smuggle heroin in their flight bags. By then, Frank was importing cocaine from the Corsicans in Venezuela to his Cuban connect, George Ramos, in Miami. Frank's carelessness over the phone led to the arrest of 9 people, including Ramos, in November 1972. Ramos then ratted him out in front of a federal grand jury and later entered witness protection. In December, a federal arrest warrant was issued for Frank. The indictment was for attempting to sell 40 pounds of cocaine in Miami between April and September of 1972. In January of 1973, Frank was arrested by DEA agents at McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas as he planned to leave for Los Angeles with his girlfriend. He was charged with tax evasion and conspiracy to distribute heroin and cocaine. Frank's bail was initially set at $5 million, the largest amount ever at the time. It was cut in half to $2.5 million once he agreed to be extradited to New York. After a few weeks in jail in New York, his bail was reduced again to $325,000. He was indicted on 6 counts of tax evasion and conspiracy to distribute heroin and cocaine, with a possible 50-year sentence looming. But Frank bailed out of jail and went right back to his old ways. Frank had met with Ernie Corraluzzo, an associate of the Genovese crime family's Greenwich Village crew, and negotiated the sale of 40 kilos of heroin for $375,000 at a meeting at the Waldorf Astoria, New York in April 1973. While Frank delivered the fee via a third party the following day, Ernie didn't provide the drugs and instead fled to the Bahamas. Frank and his associates then kidnapped James Capitorto, one of Ernie's bodyguards, in an effort to retrieve the money. Upon hearing about the kidnapping, Corraluzzo took a flight back to New York, returned the money to Frank, and gave him 25 kilos of heroin on consignment. On July 2nd, 1973, Frank was scheduled to appear in court, but never showed. Allegedly, he cleaned out his life savings, an estimated $20 million, and fled the country with his girlfriend. Frank left his common-law wife and their 3 sons behind in their Staten Island mansion and was never seen again. Some believe Matthews, who would be 80 years old today, may still be alive. Some friends heard he was in Africa. A former member of the U.S. Marshal Service who handled his case thinks he is dead. Former DEA agent Frank Panessa said in a July 2022 interview that the agency received unconfirmed reports that Frank had been lured to the Bahamas by the Genovese family and killed, partly to keep him from snitching and partly due to his feud with Corraluzzo. The DEA actually ranked Frank as one of the top 10 drug traffickers in American history. I know this is like illegal behavior, but the fact that he came in, he changed the entire drug business. He's like, oh, you mafia dudes don't want me to come in. I just go to a Cuban guy and get my stuff from there. And then he becomes the big guy, like the really large scale dealer. Like he's doing all types of things. He's making millions of dollars. He's got multiple homes. All these people are working for him. And then when the walls are closing in, he was able to get away. He was able to escape the DEA, which nobody does, which is literally almost impossible. And the fact that he escaped for 50 years, they still haven't found him. He might be dead. You know, who knows? He might be in Panama somewhere smiling with his feet up with a cigar. You never know. But the fact that he was able to escape for over 50 years, like it's been over 50 years, he was saving up so much to get out. That's the point, but it kind of sucks that you left your wife and your sons behind. I guess he couldn't take everybody. I don't know. I definitely want to dive into more of these like mafia stories. like kind of like organized crime type stories. Of course, I'm still going to be doing my serial killer stuff, but I kind of want to divvy it up, kind of want to mix it up, you know, not just serial killer stuff all the time, like some organized crime, some other type of like some white collar crime, like some other type of stuff, you know, just kind of diversifying the content on the channel. I really appreciate all you guys who watch my videos. I appreciate everyone who supports. Definitely leave a like, hit that subscribe button, turn on that post notification bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much. I'm out. Peace.